Hello, friends. I want to talk about Ted Turner, the cable news icon who passed away on Wednesday at the age of 87. For a lot of people, they remember him for creating CNN, but for a lot of people, especially in their 40s, they remember him for creating the Cartoon Network. People like me, I watched a lot of cartoons, back in the 90s, but I watched Captain Planet. That was my favorite cartoon in the 90s, Captain Planet. I watched that show religiously. I'm in Canada, so I get to watch it on YTV. I don't remember if we had the Cartoon Network, but I had YTV, and I would always stay tuned and wait for Captain Planet to come to my TV, and I would watch it, you know. And years later, I actually got the whole series on DVD, so I got to watch it with no commercial interruptions. But that is what people remember Ted Turner of, is being the icon of cartoons. And he was amazing. He was one of these good billionaires. There's a lot of bad billionaires in the world, but for Ted Turner, I believe he was one of the good billionaires because he gave away a lot of his money. He gave $1 billion to the UN, and he has given so much other money to other causes, other charities. He loves to protect the land, so he owns a lot of land in Atlanta, a lot of land, millions of acres. So he was one of those great, great, great billionaires. I also remember him for TBS because apart from CNN, he also created TBS. He also created TNT and Turner Classic Movies. But for me, TBS was another thing that I remember him for because TBS had the best movies. They had the best movies, like the coolest movies. So I would always tune into TBS to see what they have. So TBS is what I remember Ted Turner for. It was amazing. And then TNT nowadays is known for the World Wrestling Federation, or WCW, or whatever you call it. So a lot of wrestling fans, they remember him for that, for TNT. But Ted Turner was just, he was a cool guy. He was such a cool guy. There's a lot of pictures of him with the cigar in the mouth. He was also a sports fan, so he owned the Atlanta Braves and the Atlanta Hawks. You could see pictures of him attending all these games. Also, I remember, like, his wife Jane Fonda. She's always bragging about. She always likes to brag about how Ted Turner created CNN. So now she's a huge activist in the world, and she always likes to brag about Ted Turner creating CNN. So, he was just a fantastic, fantastic, fantastic guy. Again, for a lot of people like myself, we just remember him as the guy who created the Cartoon Networks. And one of his rivals, I would say, because he created CNN in 1980, and then in 1996, Rupert Murdoch created Fox News, which was a direct competition to CNN, and they've been rivals. But when Ted Turner passed away, Rupert Murdoch said he was one of Ted Turner was one of his closest friends, good friends. But CNN versus Fox, it's uh, it's one of those iconic matches. But sad that he passed away. I think he was battling some health problems. There was some health problems, but he has a big family. He has a big family, so all of them are, mourning right now. And I think a lot of people who just loves cable news networks or whatever like that, because he created a system, like he created a way to broadcast the news. You just look at how CNN is reporting their news, and then how the other ones came along, MSNBC and whatever like that. They're basically using the Ted Turner model for creating news. So he was an icon. He was a pioneer, and he was a great, great guy who gave away a lot of his personal wealth to great causes. He helped human beings, which was fantastic. There's not a lot of billionaires out there who did what Ted Turner did. There's a lot of these, spoiled billionaires who spend their money going up to space and burning their money on stupid things, but they're not really focusing on the human beings. They're not really focusing on charity. They're focusing on themselves, nobody else. These are the selfish billionaires. But Ted Turner was one of those amazing good billionaires. Like when I think of him, I think of Bill Gates. Bill Gates is another great billionaire. Um, but we don't have a lot of good billionaires in the world. A lot of these billionaires, they're just spoiled, and they just want to be rich, 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 rich. They want to have the most money in their bank account, because it's a competition. Who has the most money in the bank account. You go from the guy who created Google to Jeff Bezos to that idiot Elon Musk, all these fools, and also the guy who now owns part of TikTok, Ellison. All these fools only cares about how far they can go. Can they get the most billions in the bank? That's all these people care about. But for people like Ted Turner, they cared about the people. He gave money to the UN. He helped protect the land in America, in Atlanta. He has like millions of acres, and he has a lot of charities he like to support. He's a sports guy. He goes to all these sports games. He was fantastic. But I think his legacy will go on for many, many generations, many, many, many years. As long as we have CNN, as long as we have TBS and TNT, and I don't know if the Cartoon Network is still in existence, but his legacy will live on, and people will always remember him as the great television pioneer icon. Thank you very much.